US-China tariff war and Africa, the battle over shea butter introduction. In the summer of 2025, a trade dispute between the United States and China opened an unexpected new front, Africa. The battleground was not oil, rare earth metals, or military bases, but shea butter, a natural product harvested, processed, and exported by thousands of African women. What seemed like a niche economic decision quickly grew into a larger story of tariffs, geopolitics, and shifting global influence. This article explores how the United States may be losing ground in Africa, while China capitalizes on the moment to solidify its role as Africa's preferred partner. The shock of US tariffs on August 1st, 2025. The US government imposed a 50% tariff on shea butter imports. Officials justified the move as a way to protect domestic industries and balance trade. But in Burkina Faso, the world's second largest exporter of shea butter, the news landed like a thunderbolt. Within hours, President Ibrahim Traoré addressed his nation, condemning the US decision as a form of economic aggression. For Burkina Faso, shea butter is not just an export commodity, it is the livelihood of 160,000 women who gather, process, and sell it. China steps in just. 3 days later, China responded with remarkable speed. On August 4th, 2025, Beijing granted over 100 Chinese companies exclusive quota-free licenses to import shea butter from Burkina Faso. That same morning, a 5-year agreement worth $2 billion was signed between Burkina Faso and China, guaranteeing stable exports without restrictions. The deal shocked international observers, not only for its size, but also for its speed. While Washington was still debating its tariff strategy, Beijing had already secured a strategic foothold in West Africa. The human impact in Burkina Faso. For the women of Burkina Faso, the US tariffs were devastating. Exports to the US plummeted 30% in just 2 days, leaving cooperatives unable to sell their goods. Many faced the prospect of bankruptcy. In response, President Traoré launched an emergency assistance fund to support women's cooperatives until the Chinese agreement came into effect. The crisis highlighted how vulnerable African economies are to the trade policies of powerful nations, but it also underscored Africa's ability to pivot quickly toward new partners. Shea butter as geopolitics. At first glance, shea butter seems far removed from the great power competition between the US and China. But in reality, it is deeply connected. Shea butter is a crucial ingredient in the global cosmetics industry, especially in moisturizers, lip balms, and skincare products. The sudden US tariffs caused chaos in American supply chains. Cosmetic companies scrambled to find alternatives, reformulating products with inferior substitutes. Prices skyrocketed from $35 per kilogram to over $60, and smaller brands, especially artisanal businesses in places like Brooklyn, were hit the hardest. For them, shea butter was not just an ingredient, but part of their identity. Losing access to it meant losing authenticity, China's strategic vision. Unlike the US approach, China's engagement with Burkina Faso went beyond short-term trade. The $2 billion deal included mandatory reinvestment inside Burkina Faso. Chinese companies pledged to build solar-powered dryers, refining laboratories, and logistics centers in the country. This ensured that more of the value chain remained in Africa rather than being extracted overseas. For the women producers, this meant not just survival, but potential long-term prosperity. For China, it meant embedding itself deeper into Africa's economic future. US backlash and economic fallout. The American cosmetics industry was not prepared for the tariff war. Major firms delayed shipments, and artisanal producers voiced outrage. Alan Kim, founder of a small skincare brand in Brooklyn, lamented, "Without shea butter, our products lose their soul." The tariffs, meant to protect US industries, instead exposed their dependence on African imports. Washington underestimated both Africa's leverage and China's readiness to step in. Africa's Rising Agency. The events in Burkina Faso are part of a broader trend, Africa asserting more control over its economic destiny. Traore's bold decision to suspend new export licenses to American corporations signaled that African leaders are no longer passive actors in global trade. Movements like Art Africa Rises and Africa Se Levanta spread across social media, celebrating the new partnership with China and encouraging African nations to negotiate from a position of strength. In Ouagadougou, murals and fashion celebrating shea butter as a symbol of national pride appeared overnight. Global ripples, the effects extended far beyond Africa and the US. In Japan, Indonesia, and the European Union, businesses began reaching out to Burkina Faso for alternative supply agreements. China's swift diplomacy created a ripple effect, encouraging other African nations to consider similar partnerships. What began as a tariff dispute quickly turned into a reconfiguration of global trade networks with Africa at the center. Cultural dimensions, shea butter has always been more than a product. For generations, African women have passed down knowledge of how to harvest and process it. The sudden global spotlight transformed what was once seen as a local tradition into a powerful symbol of cultural pride and resilience. By integrating reinvestment into its trade deal, China not only secured access to a commodity, but also aligned itself with the cultural and social aspirations of African communities. The U.S. strategic miscalculation. The U.S. miscalculated on several fronts. First, it assumed Africa would absorb the tariffs without resistance. Second, it failed to anticipate China's agility in offering an attractive alternative. Finally, it underestimated the symbolic power of shea butter in both African identity and global commerce. By the time Washington realized the full impact, it had already lost trust and influence in Burkina Faso. Looking forward, the shea butter dispute may seem small compared to issues like energy or security, but it represents a larger shift. The balance of power in Africa is changing. Countries like Burkina Faso are no longer mere suppliers. They are negotiating partners. China's approach, emphasizing infrastructure, local value addition, and cultural respect, resonates deeply. Unless the US adapts, it risks losing more than just access to African commodities. It risks losing Africa itself. Conclusion: the tariff war over shea butter is more than an economic story. It is a lesson in geopolitics. In a single week, the US turned an African partner into a critic, while China turned the same partner into a long-term ally. For Burkina Faso, the crisis became an opportunity to strengthen its economy, empower its women, and elevate its global standing. For Africa as a whole, it was a moment of awakening, a reminder that the continent holds more power than it often realizes. And for the US, it was a warning. In the race for Africa's future, tariffs may win battles, but they lose wars.